वक्रतुण्ड महाकाय सूर्यकोटि समप्रभ निर्विघ्नं कुरु मे देव सर्वकार्येषु सर्वदा. Namaste. Welcome to a new episode of Divine Delights titled Gananatha. We are back with an enticing story on Lord Ganesha from Sanatana Dharma, and I am your friendly neighborhood storyteller, Sai Renu Shankar. So, without much ado, let us start the session. Narayanam namaskritya naram chaiva narottamam devim saraswatim vyasam tato jayamudiraye. Namo dharmaya mahate namah krishnaya vedase brahmanebhyo namaskritya dharman vakshyami sashvatan. Do you recognize these shlokas? Yes. These are the valedictory shlokas of the great Indian epic, the Mahabharata. In the introduction episode, we saw a story that showed how stories are powerful. In this first episode, we are going to listen to a story in the Mahabharata and also about the Mahabharata. Intrigued? Listen on. Dear listeners, there is a war going on now in this earth. In the Dwapara Yuga, say 5200 years ago, there happened a world war of mammoth proportions. A huge array of elephants looking like mountains moving, fleets and fleets of horses moving like four-legged lightnings, chariot after chariot after chariot, each housing a warrior of incomparable valor and talent, endless battalions of foot soldiers, their armors flashing in the sun. Such was the armies. All the countries in the earth at that time, sans just two, had participated in that war. And their army, total army, Mahabharata itself says, consisted of 1,660,020,000 men. Mind-boggling? Let me repeat it for you. 1,660,020,000 men. This large number of men, large army, was annihilated in just 18 days. Would you believe me when I say this whole war, all this mass destruction was because of petty differences and jealousy between cousins of one family? So it was. Now, there was a sage who witnessed this war. He, in fact, was an ancestor to the cousins I had mentioned, and he lived long after the offspring of these cousins were alive and gone. He, at one point of time, thought about the war and decided that he would record the story of the war, behind the war and after the war. Because such a story would teach a lot of very valuable lessons to the coming generations. Then sage Vyasa, for that's who it was, went into a cave near Gangotri, the birthplace of holy river Ganga, and went into deep tapas for 3 years. What is tapas? Closing your eyes and sitting in a corner. Tapas is a practice by which we attain the mental state of deep peace, extreme concentration, awareness, and focus. In this state, we are victorious in attaining whatever we seek. Sage Vyasa sat in tapas and composed the epic of Mahabharata in his mind. When Sage Vyasa completed, conceiving the story in his mind, he decided that this great epic has to be written. In those days, epics, stories, lessons, Vedas, they were propagated by mouth-to-mouth communication. But Sage Vyasa decided that Mahabharata has to be written for scholars to study, propagate, and preserve it for posterity. But who will be able to write it up as he recites it? Remember, Mahabharata was the biggest book in the world then, and it is even today. Sage Vyasa was worried, contemplating this problem. And at that time, Lord Brahma visited his hermitage. Vyasa was so glad and he worshipped Lord Brahma and gave him a seat. Then he respectfully submitted, "My lord, I have composed an epic which is big in size and great in values, even if I say so myself. But I cannot find anyone who could write it." Lord Brahma replied, "Maharishi, I know that you have composed a great epic, and I concur that it has to be written for several good reasons. I will tell you the best person who could do it. It is Lord Ganesha. Please summon him and he will fulfill your prayers." Then he took leave of Vyasa. Vyasa understood the sagacity of this advice and immediately thought reverently of Lord Ganesha. Look at the depth of his devotion and grace of Lord Ganesha. Instantaneously he appeared before Sage Vyasa. See, this is one of the endearing qualities of Lord Ganesha. You think of him, he will be right there. You put him as a big idol in a temple, he is there. You buy and bring home small idols made of him, small idols of him made of stone, clay, plaster of Paris, paper mache, coconut, whatever. Or decorate your walls with paintings depicting his beautiful form. He is there. You see a stone or a brick on a roadside and you say, "Hey, that stone, doesn't it look like Lord Ganesha?" He manifests in the stone immediately. Now, when Vyasa prayed to him, Ganesha appeared before him and asked, "Vyasa, what can I do for you?" Vyasa said, "Swamin, I have conceived a great book in my mind, and would you write it for me as I recite it?" Ganesha replied, "Oh yes, why not?" And Mahabharata came into being. Let us praise Lord Ganesha, so easily reached by his devotees. No difficult rituals, no fasting or long worship. Think of him, he is there. Just ask him, it is done. So there the story ends, right? No, the story does not end here. It gets interesting. See, nowadays, nobody writes. Whenever you need to communicate, you pull out your phone and check, 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 check. Done. Whether you communicate or not, check, 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 check. When you are walking, check, 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 check. When you are eating, check, 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 check. When you are sleeping, check, 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 check. And the phone falls on your face. It would surprise you, today's kids, that there was a time when everything has to be written by hand. Documents, letters, and so on. Many a time, people would dictate what they want to be written, and a person called scribe would take them down. See, my grandfather used to ask a cousin of mine to write his letters. He would start the letter with the popular word of your Ubhaya Kuchalopari. Have you ever heard of this term before? Ubhaya Kuchalopari. It means exchange of greetings. Okay? Believe me, my cousin would take a full 5 minutes to write this one word. Then 5 minutes per sentence, punctuated by several doubts and interruptions. And my grandfather often lost the thread of what he was saying and got angry and upset. Therefore, what would you expect a person who is going to recite a book to say? What would his instructions be to his scribe? Please write as fast as possible. Try and match the speed of my dictation. Right? It didn't happen here. A similar condition was laid by Lord Ganesha, the scribe. He said, I will write quite fast, so please keep a steady flow of dictation. If you stop, I will stop and will not resume. Vyasa accepted the condition with trepidation. When you are dictating a letter or a short document, you can go on without taking a break. Maybe even a small book. Can you dictate the biggest book in the world, consisting of 100,000 verses, composing it as you go on, without taking a small pause from time to time to think? But when you have got the best of scribes, you have to accept his conditions. See, when you employ a person, the employer sets the rules and regulations. You get a printed document titled Rules and Regulations. But when you get a super candidate with top-notch record, then the candidate sets the conditions. If you don't meet the conditions, there are other employers, right? So what can Vyasa do now? How will he manage this issue diplomatically? Vyasa accepts Ganesha's condition and puts forth a counter condition. He said, Ganesha, you should write only after understanding the meaning of what I recite. Are you getting it? Ganesha should begin writing only after he understands the meaning of the words recited by Vyasa. Okay? Ganesha's face showed an enchanting smile. He accepted the counter condition. For an elephant, its tusks are its pride. It keeps them sharp and clean and smooth. Quite proud of it. But this divine elephant Lord Ganesha, broke one of his tusks to write the Mahabharata. He sets a shining example to the fact that one should be prepared to sacrifice anything, even one's most prized possession, for the sake of Dharma. Now the poet and the scribe sat in the banks of holy river Saraswati and started the process. Vyasa began to recite the verses and Ganesha wrote it with his tusk instantaneously as it was being recited. A moment came when Vyasa had to think a bit and compose the forthcoming verses. But if he stopped, Ganesha will stop, right? So what to do? What Vyasa did was to insert a complex verse, the meaning of which was not quite clear. It required a lot of contemplation to understand, even for scholars. Even Ganesha, who is a Sarvajna, a know-all, needed a second to understand the meaning of this verse. So his pen stopped for a second. He's contemplating to understand the meaning of the verse. Within that second, Vyasa was able to compose several thousand verses in his mind. Vyasa says he inserted 8,800 of such verses, puzzling verses, which are collectively called Bharata Guddu. Guddu means puzzle. This is how the greatest book of the world of all times came to be written. The book then came to be studied in part and in whole. Several books were written about that one book, the incidents described in it, like the famous Kiratara Arjuniyam by Kavi Bharavi and Veni Samharam by Bhattanarayana Kavi, Panjali Sabadam by our own Mahakavi Bharati. Several translations of it came into being, like Villi Bharatam in Tamil, Tunjathu Ezhuthachan Mahabharatam in Malayalam, so on and so forth. The book is the source of several researches and the means to know about ancient Bharat, its countries, culture, science, technology, administration, warfare, religion, and spirituality. That completes today's short story. Folks, let me ask you a question about this story. Why do you think Lord Brahma suggested Lord Ganesha as the best scribe to write the Mahabharata? Why is he, Lord Ganesha, the god worshipped by those who employ writing and wordsmithing as a profession, like authors, speakers, etc.? Why? I will give you a hint. The reason is why Lord Ganesha was called Gananayaka, Gananatha, Ganesha, etc. If you know the answer, please write the answer in the comments. And the best answer will be featured in the next episode of Divine Delights, which is titled Vigneshwara. In every episode of Divine Delights, we will ask you a question. The answer will be revealed in the next episode. So, please like our videos, share them, and subscribe to our channel, Divine Delights. Poem time now. முழுமதி ஒளிதரு முகமீது முறுவலில் அருளிடும் முதல்வோனே பழவினை அழலிடு பரமேச பகையரு நிலையருள் பெருமாளே மழுக்கர மணி செய்யும் மதயானை மறைதொழு அரியவன் மருகோனே கழலினை நிழலருள் கணநாத கனிவோடு வரமருள் பெருமாளே. Come, let us learn Dharma so we learn everything else. Come, let us practice Dharma so we are always victorious. Come, let us protect our Dharma so Dharma protects us. Dharmo rakshati rakshitaha. Jai Hind.
अभीष्टवरद श्रीमहागणपते अभीष्टवरद श्रीमहागणपते अभीष्टवरद श्रीमहागणपते आगम वेदान्त्यन्त रहितपते अभीष्टवरद श्री महागणपते आगम वेदान्त्यन्त रहितपते अभीष्टवरद श्री महागणपते कवीन्द्र रवि विनुत कनकमय दिव्य 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 चरण कमल मूलो नम्मितिनि चरण कमल मूलो नम्मितिनि चरण कमल मूलो नम्मितिनि सानि पग नी पगरि पगरि सा नि सरि ग प रे ग प नि रि ग रि प ग प नि ग नि सा नि प नि रि सा नि प ग प स रि ग प नि अभीष्टवरद श्री महागणपते आगम वेदान्त्यन्त रहितपते अभीष्टवरद श्री महागणपते मुक्ति मार्गमुनकु मोदटी देवमुनि शक्ति सुमुखत भक्तुलगु वारिकी मुक्ति मार्गमुनकु मोदटी देवमुनि शक्ति सुमुखत भक्तुलगु वारिकी सिद्धि बुद्धि वर फलमुनो सगिन सिद्धि बुद्धि वर फलमुनो सगिन सिद्धि बुद्धि वर फलमुनो सगिन सद्गुरु श्री त्याग राजपोगडिन सद्गुरु श्री त्याग राजपोगडिन सद्गुरु श्री त्यागराजो पोगडिन सारि पगनि पगरि पगरि सा नि सरि ग प रे ग प नि रि ग रे नि प ग प नि गा रे स नि प नि रे स नि प ग प स रे ग प नि अभीष्ट वरद श्री महागणपते आगम वेदान्त्यन्त रहितपते अभीष्ट वरद श्री महागणपते ए